In business today, three things to know. First, where does ISIS get its money? How one of the world's most vicious terrorist groups has also become one of the best funded. Then, America's pill-popping addiction. We'll speak with a California prosecutor who is suing Big Pharma over alleged drug pushing. And serving up millions. The U.S. Open has begun, and the dollars are pouring in for the nation's premier tennis event. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. They have moved almost at will through parts of two countries, killed countless civilians, and spread their gospel of terrorism throughout the Middle East. The group known as Islamic State, also known as ISIS, is once again on America's radar following the murder of American journalist James Foley. On Tuesday, word came that an American citizen who had joined ISIS was killed while fighting alongside the group in Syria. ISIS has moved through northern Iraq, where American fighter planes had to beat back advancements after they chased villagers up the side of a mountain. This map shows regions either controlled by ISIS or where they have a large amount of support in Iraq. In Syria, they are one of the groups fighting in the civil war. We know this about ISIS. Besides being relentless and brutal, the group is incredibly well-funded. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Arise News contributor Eric Ham joins us now from Washington, D.C. Eric has been following ISIS for some time. Welcome to Exchange, Eric.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you put this in perspective for us, compared ISIS to other rogue groups out there, how well-funded they are?
Sure. I think the group that we most compare it to is Al-Qaeda, of course. And during Al-Qaeda's heyday, they were bringing in roughly around $25–30 million per year, which was a phenomenal amount. But already right now, ISIS is said to have actually surpassed that amount. And they're reaping enormous amounts of cash right now, both from oil revenues that they've seized in both Syria and Iraq. And what's really interesting about that is they've actually seized oil from Syria and are actually selling it back to Syria, which is really amazing.
I understand, Eric, that they have about $2 billion in the bank somewhere.
Exactly.
Which makes them incredibly wealthy. Walk us through a little bit about how they get their money, because they're not just an ideology here. They want to claim to be a government, but they are a real criminal enterprise.
Absolutely. Much like you would consider North Korea to be a rogue state or criminal state, if ISIS were to be considered a state, it would operate very much like a North Korea is now. And ISIS has actually been receiving enormous amounts of funding for about 2 decades now. You have to understand, this is actually a Sunni-Shia war that's taking place. And so you've had wealthy individuals, wealthy donors from countries like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and other Sunni-led nations that have actually poured millions of dollars into the organization. And it's only been recently that we've seen ISIS now begin, through these enormous amounts of deposits into this organization, that they're now actually taking advantage of these resources and some of their military apparatuses to actually begin to go after and seize other properties that are now bringing in more money. And another source that we've seen them be able to take advantage of very recently has been kidnappings. They are said to be making in the tens of millions of dollars from European individuals and European nations for kidnappings. We do know about the brutal beheading of James Foley and the amount of money that ISIS wanted in exchange for him. Well, most European nations and individuals are actually just paying these ransoms. And that's another source of funding that they're bringing in.
And they have many different lines of revenue, if you will, here. And, you know, what I find interesting is they are able to fund their soldiers. They're paying pretty well if you want to go to work for them.
Absolutely. And this is what's very interesting about ISIS right now, because they're beginning to operate very much like a state. If you go into Iraq right now, there are places where ISIS has control and they're actually charging tolls for driving on the roads. So they'll stop the vehicle, and then they'll pretty much look around, look at the size of the vehicle, and then they'll throw out an arbitrary number, let's say $500, that you'll have to pay. And then what they'll do is they'll actually give you a receipt for that. So they're beginning to take on many of the machinations of an actual state right now. So they do see themselves, in fact, as a state.
So the question is where are they keeping the money? And because they're not running around with credit cards, ISIS isn't issuing credit cards, where do they keep the money, and why can't we get our hands on it and choke them off?
Well, because ISIS has actually seized enormous amounts of property, and because they, like banks, like oil refineries and things like that. And actually what we're seeing, particularly with the oil refineries, while they were able to seize them and then seize some of the proceeds and the actual oil that has actually been refined, we've seen that source of revenue actually begin to decline because they simply don't have the number of people, personnel to actually refine the oil and actually take it out and sell it. What they're actually doing is just taking oil and, say, driving it in a truck and then selling it. They don't have the pipelines or the other capabilities to be able to do that. So I think if the United States, along with some of its other partners, if they can actually begin the process of actually beginning to contain ISIS, then I think that will begin to actually diminish their resources.
All right, but we're obviously coming to this very late in the game. Arise News contributor Eric Kim in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turning now to the market, investors took a breather as stocks fluctuated. Not a whole lot of news driving them. Here are the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing up 15 points to 17,122. The S&P 500 up a dime. That is a record, 2,000.12. And the NASDAQ pulling back $1.02. Taking a look at some of the stocks we're watching today. General Motors receiving claims for 107 deaths linked to that faulty ignition switch. That's according to a spokeswoman for the attorney overseeing the program. This far exceeds the 13 deaths that GM officially attributed to the problem. GM closing down 14 cents. Struggling electronics retailer Radio Shack. Radio Shack still in business, anyone? Really? Yeah. Is reportedly in talks to get a cash lifeline from its shareholder, Standard General. Analysts say Radio Shack could run out of cash as soon as next year. That's because nobody is buying anything from them. And that could put the company into bankruptcy. Radio Shack's shares, however, up a substantial 27% today. And Smith & Wesson announcing quarterly sales down by more than $40 million. The company says the demand for rifles led the decline. Smith & Wesson trading down $1.79, off by 13%. Taking a look at commodities, gold closing at $12.83 an ounce, and oil pulling back 3 pennies. Coming up, has Big Pharma turned us into a bunch of pill poppers? One lawsuit says yes. You're watching Arise Exchange.
I think media and reporters have a lot to answer for.
AIDS, hunger, people not having running water, the things that we just take for granted.
I think the most important issues in the world today are education and poverty.
Terrorism and war, I guess, is always. It's always an issue, and the quality of life of certain groups of people in certain areas.
I think inequality.
Arise News, every culture, every angle. I believe that people are watching news less today, definitely. I think that more so people are going online to catch their news.
We've numbed the human mind to murders and all these bad things. The content is a constant loop of the same stuff. So there needs to be, new content all the time.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. Several local governments are suing 5 drug manufacturers, claiming they are causing the country's prescription drug epidemic. The suit alleges the companies are waging a, quote, campaign of deception in order to increase painkiller sales. Orange County, California is among those in the lawsuit. Its district attorney, Tony Rackauckas, joins us now by phone to talk more about the lawsuit. Tony, welcome to Arise Exchange, and thank you for spending a few minutes with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Walk us through this lawsuit a little bit. What are you alleging that these pharmaceutical companies are doing?
Well, very close to what you just said. That is that they're waging campaign of deception to get people to accept these drugs, get people and as well as doctors to prescribe them. You know, these are drugs that we're talking about are opioids, and they're admitted or allowed to be used by the Food and Drug Administration for very limited use, for severe cancer pain, for end-of-life treatment and things like that. But what these companies have done is that they've gone out and advertised or taught or campaigned to the effect that that these drugs are not addictive and that they should be used for all kinds of other treatment, like the less severe sorts of pain, back pain, knee pain, things of that nature.
And painkillers like these, for example, Oxy, are as addictive, I understand, as heroin is itself.
Exactly. They're addictive drugs, and they become people become addicted to them in a relatively short time. And in addition to that, you need more of the drug to get a similar therapeutic effect in time.
Tony, why go after the pharmaceutical companies, though? Aren't the doctors responsible here for prescribing these drugs? And I know in many states, for example, in New York, when you get what might be if it's a Schedule A drug, I'm not sure if that's the right term, you have to fill out a bunch of forms, and they're supposed to keep track of these.
Right. I'm not saying that the doctors are or that any particular doctor is without fault, but these companies have actually gone out with the representatives to doctors' offices and teaching in the continuing medical education conferences that they have. They're telling doctors that these drugs are not as bad as they are in effect, and they're saying they're not addictive, and they're even saying that some of the things that they're seeing that they think is addiction is not addiction; it's pseudo addiction, and they can treat it by giving them more drugs. So the company's actually at fault because, in my view, that they're at fault because they're convincing the doctors to prescribe these in all kinds of cases where they're not.
And they're doing misleading marketing. Is there any evidence that the pharmaceutical companies are doing what they've been accused of doing before, which is take out doctors, wine and dine them, get them to prescribe these drugs?
Well, at least we have evidence that they're sending representatives to the doctors' offices and that sort of thing. I don't have knowledge about the wining and dining.
So what do you want to see happen here?
We'll be looking into that too in the discovery process, of course.
What do you want to see done here?
Well, what I want to see is I want to see full disclosure. First of all, that the companies make it clear that what they've done so far has been dishonest, and that these drugs are addictive and dangerous and should only be used for severe cancer pain and for end-of-life treatment and things of that nature, so that the doctors will know not to prescribe it for all of these various other maladies.
And
that's to begin with.
And what about the Food and Drug Administration here? I mean, that's the regulatory body that oversees pharmaceutical companies. This sounds like this should be done on the federal level.
Well, certainly the federal government could be doing something about it, but this is a big problem in our state, and so we're bringing this on behalf of the people of the state of California as an unfair business practice and as false advertising. And so it's a separate case.
Sure, I know that Chicago is also suing and other municipalities. What is the reaction you're getting from other local prosecutors throughout California? You think people are going to sign on to the lawsuit?
Well, they're watching. They're watching to see what happens, and what they'll do as we move forward. I really can't anticipate.
Tony Rackauckas, thank you so much from Orange County, California.
Thank you.
Time now for our business ticker. Stories making headlines across the nation and the world. The International Monetary Fund chief, Christine Lagarde, is having a bad day. She is under investigation in a French fraud case. Lagarde is considered a suspect in an inquiry for having approved a 400 million euro payout to a French businessman who owned the shoe company Adidas to settle a dispute between him and the government. She was finance minister at the time. The, quote, simple negligence charge is far less serious than a fraud charge, and Lagarde says she has no plans to resign. Time Warner Cable says service has largely been restored, thank God, after a colossal failure. A nationwide outage wiped out internet and on-demand services this morning. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has called for a state investigation on the outage because we have a constitutional right to cable television, folks. It affected more than 11 million customers nationwide. As part of its review of Comcast's proposed merger with Time Warner, the government is asking for a look over. You won't find American Airlines listed on orbits anymore. The world's largest airline has pulled its listings because of a contract dispute. Travelers who already have tickets through Orbit's or sister site cheaptickets.com will still be able to travel, but any changes will have to be made through the airlines directly. The wildly popular messaging app Snapchat may now be one of the world's most valuable private tech startups. Get this, despite virtually no revenue at all, the mobile app, which allows users to share photographs that are automatically deleted within seconds, we could all use that feature, has quietly raised new funds that bring its valuation to $10 billion. And imagine taking every cold cut you can think of and piling it onto one sandwich. Yum. That's the idea behind Arby's new $10 meat mountain of calories and fat. It includes chicken, turkey, corned beef, roast beef, brisket, bacon, steak, and ham. And that's not the whole list either. But it won't be listed on the menu. It's part of a secret list of items that customers can only get if they ask for it by name. We all know Silicon Valley is the world's technology center, attracting thousands of startup companies. But now, a number of cities around the world are trying to become the next big tech hub. New York City, of course, already has Silicon Alley, but now there's Silicon Harlem, part of the overall renaissance of the northern Manhattan neighborhood. Here to talk more about Silicon Harlem are the co-founders, Clayton Banks and Bruce Lincoln. And we welcome you to Arise Exchange. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Just Harlem, in the past 10 years, has had a tremendous renaissance. Former President Bill Clinton, of course, has an office there. I think Major League Baseball is now located up there. Give me first an overview of how Harlem has really transformed itself, and what do you think is driving that?
Clayton.
Okay. Well, Harlem has always been on the cutting edge of culture, on the cutting edge of art, on the cutting edge of music, and certainly it's a neighborhood. And so we've seen as a proliferation of the same activity we're seeing all around New York. New restaurants opening, museums proliferating, people connecting, and so it's a renaissance all over again. We've had the Harlem Renaissance before, we're having a new one in the 21st century. And so it's prime to allow for us at Silicon Harlem to transform the neighborhood into a technology and innovation hub.
So, Bruce, what kind of companies are you trying to attract?
Well, we're attracting apps companies. So we have companies such as Around the Way that have developed an app that lets you identify where there are minority-owned businesses. We have merchandise companies. We have a company that's developing a very premium brand of organic pet food to meet that need that's in Harlem. So you have the full range from social innovation to this kind of customer disruption.
Okay, so if I'm starting a tech company, why am I coming to Harlem? Why am I not down in Chelsea? Why am I not in San Francisco?
Well, you can be in all of those locations, but with Harlem, it's affordable. One of the best points about it is it's affordable. At the moment, it's affordable.
Some have watched the rent skyrocket.
Yes. And so, yeah, you can get good space. We are now opening up co-working spaces.
I was about to ask that because that's big on these tech startups, that you're having wide amount of space, office space, for co-working space. And that, I imagine, attracts companies.
It does, especially those startups. So startups with the great new tech idea, whether it's the great new Instagram or Facebook, is starting up as 1-2-man shops. And then rather than taking on a full office space, they can come into a co-working space that we have a couple of them proliferating in Harlem right now.
Tech companies are going to be very interested in connectivity and what the grid looks like up there. An initiative started under Mayor Bloomberg, of course, was to provide wireless access. Where are we in that, and how sophisticated from a technology standpoint is the neighborhood right now?
Well, what we have is the Free Harlem Wireless Network, which is the largest contiguous Wi-Fi network in the country. And with our relationship with Verizon Fios, we are developing an initiative called Gigabit Harlem, where we're looking at the next generation internet to make sure that companies will be able to tie into the fiber optic connectivity. And the goal is in the next 5 years create really a ubiquitous network in Harlem that can support all types of on-demand activity.
And what about government assistance here? At one point it was an enterprise zone. I don't know if it still is. Is there some tax incentives that either the city or the state is getting involved to try to encourage companies to set up shop?
Well, they're starting to develop Startup NY, which will be based at City College. So that's meant to attract companies that will be able to either develop a new technology or spin it from City College.
And Startup NY, just to tell the audience, if you connect yourself to a state university, you get a variety of tax benefits.
You get 10 years of tax breaks. There's also activity that's using tax credits for some of the financing. We're involved with a organization called Miami Studios that uses tax credits, and it's actually where we're starting to develop our Silicon Harlem Innovation Center.
Look, revitalizing neighborhoods, I think, starts on the small business level. And I don't want to give you, have you give away any of your secret sauce, but what can you say to the communities out there elsewhere that want to get involved and look for startup businesses? Because by attracting workers, you attract new residents and you increase the tax base.
One of the things that we found works, it's not much of a secret anymore, is meetups. If you can organize meetups in your neighborhood, if you can organize meetups in your city, you'll find that there are like-minded people in the city, and they just need a place to organize. And once you galvanize the community, you can now start to attract those type of businesses. And it's pretty much a fact that one tech job will create 5 additional jobs.
Is that true? One tech job creates 5 jobs.
That's right.
With services, other...
Exactly.
Okay, so what more do you want to see from the state to try to help Harlem? And is this the government needs to get involved, or you think that the businesses are supporting stuff? I guess you're getting help from Verizon.
Well, I think the idea is to sort of think of it not simply as a public-private partnership, more of a private-public partnership. How can we bring private enterprise and what we do entrepreneurially to connect with public agencies in municipalities? So we work closely with electeds and closely with the mayor's office. We also work with the mom and pop shops and the nonprofits, because it has to be that kind of coordinated ecosystem.
Clayton, what about your background that brought you to this?
Well, I worked in cable for many, many years and launched a network called Sega Channel back in '94. And so that was my first sort of entree into technology outside of school. And it really sort of inspired me to see what was possible using digital technology. So that was my background, and then Bruce and I hooked up, and we've been kindred spirits in terms of knowing what can power a community.
Okay, and for people looking for you quickly, a URL to find you?
HTTP it's
siliconharlem.net.
That's good. Thank you so much. Clayton Banks, Bruce Lincoln, thank you so much for coming by. We're going to follow your progress, and I hope to come up there and see it as well.
Thank you very much.
Ahead, how the Ice Bucket Challenge led to the arrest of a felon. Our favorite person of the day is next here on Arise Exchange.
One of the great things about Arise News, it is truly a multicultural global channel that is paying attention to communities of all different kinds, not just here in the United States, not just in Africa, but all around the world, as we're giving a voice to the people that don't traditionally have the kind of a voice that a mass media organization can have. You're getting here at Arise News that you're not going to find at the other networks is a unique perspective, and I think that's part of what Arise is here to do.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, not for the right reasons. We probably can do stories like these all day. People wanted by the cops who are then caught because they appear in some stupid way on Facebook. In this case, 20-year-old Jayshawn Morris decided to post a video of himself taking the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. He did, instead of donating the $100. But it is cops who poured cold water on Morris. You see, he was wanted by the police in Omaha, Nebraska for violating terms of his parole and skipping town. He had been in jail for being involved in a gang shootout. Someone saw his Facebook video, recognized it, that it was Morris, and phoned police. When caught, Morris allegedly lied about his name, and when that didn't work, he just spit on the officers. The moral of the story, if you are wanted by police and are then nominated to do the Ice Bucket Challenge, maybe you should just donate the $100 instead. And so, Jayshawn Morris is our favorite person of the day. Still ahead, the big money is in Queens this week at the U.S. Open. You're watching Arise Exchange.
I have never worked for a news organization like Arise News. The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in. In this news organization, everybody's opinion counts. There is no big I's and little U's. Every angle, every perspective matters, and that's freeing in so many ways.
It's considered the last Grand Slam of the tennis season, the U.S. Open, and it is a big breadwinner for players. This year, organizers say players stand to take in almost $40 million in prize money, one of the biggest payouts in sports. The United States Tennis Association is banking on the prize topping $50 million by 2017. For more on the numbers, we turn to sports business expert and Source Magazine columnist Brandon Robinson. Brandon, welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thank you for having me, buddy. How you doing?
When you take a look at the U.S. Open, you compare it to other big sports events, how does it stack up?
Stacks up pretty well. Obviously, the U.S. Open's been in existence since 1818. They're trying to rise the purses every year. As you said earlier, $38 million is the purse this year, and they're trying to increase it every year. You know, going into 2017, they want to raise it to $50 million. So every year they're trying to raise it comparatively to maybe golf. Golf has a $8 million purse for the Barclays tournament that they have, but in the month of August alone, they'll be awarding $67 million.
So if you are a tennis professional, you need to be in the U.S. Open, basically.
Show me the money.
Yeah, show me the money. Absolutely. What about the sponsors? Who are the big sponsors of this event, and how do they do?
Well, the big sponsors, obviously Nike, Gatorade, Rolex. Everybody can use a Rolex as well as the money. But those companies really want to make sure that their players are eating and also get bonus money as well. So those are the big players in the game.
So what is driving the revenue for the USTA and for those involved? Is it attendance, sponsorship? Are people watching more on television?
Sure, you're definitely going to go with the ratings. You're also going to go to attendance. Don't get me wrong, right down the road in Flushing, a lot of people love tennis. I would say it's kind of up there because you have such an international flair. You have guys from Switzerland, you have American Power, you have people from all over that are supporting.
I want to ask you about the people all over. Tennis has been accused of a significant lack of diversity, the way golf used to be accused of that. Improvements not just on the court, but from the people watching tennis?
Yeah, obviously you want to have diversity. On the women's side, it is American-driven, obviously Serena Williams and then, some other people. But I think it has to be more of an initiative locally in communities, whether it's the inner city or just American abroad, to get more people to want to actually play.
Well, they've always said that about golf, and Tiger Woods is trying to attract and getting people the tools to be able to play. And on that level, do you think we're getting more kids involved in tennis?
Well, I think that's a socioeconomic status thing. Tiger Woods obviously had parents who could instill that time and money to do it. Basketball or football is a little cheaper to, you got lessons, you've got to buy the shoes, the clubs, all that stuff. So I think it needs to be more initiative for people actually taking the time with kids to actually, play.
One of the things that surprises me is it doesn't appear that Americans sort of get tired of big sporting events. I mean, we just came off watching the World Cup and record ratings for the World Cup, and so we seem to be in a pattern, and then the Olympics, of course, in the winter. Sure. We seem to be in a pattern where every 3 months or so, there is a major event. Is there any concern that we're going to sort of get sports weary?
No. As my grandmother, she's watching right now, but she always says to me, people spend money for what they want to spend money on, even if we're in a recession, and even people want to be entertained, but people also want to be entertained and see high-quality stuff. If it's high quality, people will pay it. I don't think there'll be a doldrums of, people kind of not want to watch sports because, hey, sports is the closest thing to watching a movie. It's theatrics, it's blood, it's sweat, it's tears.
You don't know how it ends either.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Just quickly here. Overall, the sponsorships head in the right direction for tennis. Any new sponsors coming in and getting into it?
You're always going to have new sponsors. Comparatively to basketball, where you have Under Armour, who's a new player in the game, you're always going to have people. Yeah, you're going to always have guys like maybe coffee makers, or you're always going to have the speed stick people, the Nike people. But there's always people that are going to be there. But the mainstays are always going to be Nike,
and
Reebok.
We only have about 20 seconds left. But tennis players don't seem to get in as much trouble as other professionals out there, right? If you're going to be a sponsor with them, you're going to...
You got to keep a clean nose, and you have to have a good PR, and I think tennis is a little bit more elite, and I think sometimes people just assume that they're doing the right thing, but overall, you don't see too many people getting in trouble.
Okay. Brandon Robinson, sports magazine columnist. Thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you
fun.
for having me. Yes, sir.
Tomorrow on Arise Exchange, the business of relief will take a look at how providing assistance to those in need has become a cash cow around the world. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. Stay right there. That was terrific.